Yeah, we're on.
Good evening, everybody. This is a meeting of the Neighbourhoods and Public Spaces Committee. This is a meeting of the Council which is being held remotely. The meeting is being recorded and streamed via YouTube, where members of the public are able to watch the meeting. The recording will be made available on the Council's website following the meeting. Please note that any comments posted on the chat feed of the Council's YouTube page during the recording of this meeting will not be monitored by the Council. Okay. Have we any apologies for absence?
No, I think everyone's here, Councillor.
Thank you. Can I ask members to mute themselves, please? And if you wish to speak, indicate with your hand and we'll call you to speak. If you can keep muted the rest of the time, it'd be appreciated. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Councillor Buckley.
Just unmute myself again now. We've got the youth zone on here. Last time I declared an interest as a county member, so just for the sake of formality, make the same declaration again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Davies.
Yes, I last time declared interest, non-pecuniary interest as a member of the Basildon Youth Strategy Group.
Thank you, Alan. Don, have you indicating?
I have. Yeah, I'm just declaring a non-pecuniary interest as a member of the Scout movement.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of August. If I go round, we agree them as a true record. Councillor Morris.
Agreed.
Councillor Davis.
Agreed.
Councillor Hollyman.
Agreed.
Councillor Buckley.
Agreed.
Councillor Ferguson.
Agreed.
And I'm in agreement as well. Thank you very much. We move on to item 4, the COVID-19 impact assessment. Mr. Blake will go through it in a moment. Members have been provided with a detailed update which they can refer to, and that was distributed this morning. Mr. Brace.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is the second update that I've given previous committee. So that's it is 6 months. So we have been exceptionally busy in that period, and we remain so. The financial position is very similar for the services within the remit of this committee. We are, although we are managing expenditure exceptionally well at this difficult time, the one thing that we are losing is income. So we do have a shortfall, or will have a shortfall by the end of the year, of around 1.4 million. However, the government have recently released their criteria in terms of claiming income lost support, which my finance colleagues are working through, and we will report that at a future committee once we have finalised that work. So to run through the services, building control, which has generally carried on working throughout through various different methods, including video. It is still continuing because it's important for our building trade in the borough to continue. It's also good to report that we have now been able to get our grants team and get some adaptations to those people that need it in their private homes. This is not council homes, in private homes. So we are now starting to see those coming through. And in fact, most of our contractors that we use are now busy all the way up to December, working in our town to get our people able to use their homes better. So we are behind because we couldn't do the grants, because we couldn't enter the house, but we are now being able to get that work done. I suppose the critical service of refuse and recycling still is as busy as ever, with an increase in our tonnage, which is good in some ways, but obviously that's a lot more work for our guys. We still are maintaining the crunch service will not return, as it is quite a challenge to ensure that our team is COVID safe, and we are protecting them for what we are considering to be our core services, which is doorstep collection. We have increased special collections, but each of those we have undertaken assessments for to ensure the stuff that we are picking up is not going to put our staff at risk, and we've got appropriate risk assessments for that. Trade waste is recovering, so our businesses are coming back. It is down on last year, but we are seeing quite a few businesses come back. Car parking, I'm sure, as the last committee, that I will be coming back to the chairman. We're currently looking at the use of car parks currently. I've been to Wickford today. Car park very, very busy, town centre reasonably busy, so it could be that there is quite a lot of all-day parking now happening. So we will be coming back probably at the next meeting to give an update on that, but certainly it may be, as delegated to me in consultation with the chairman, we may look at some solutions to try and stop all-day parking for commuters that would appear to be happening in Wickford and Billericay. Environmental enforcement, I'm sure you would have seen quite a lot of the press that our CCTV cameras, which I think is something that certainly the chairman of this committee has been very keen with me to get up and running, and my officers have done an excellent job of putting them in the right places. And the best news you could have is we are catching people at a regular rate that we would never be able to catch. So it is proving to be very successful. So we will continue to try and catch those that are dumping illegally. Our trial for our external enforcement team has now resumed. We will be reporting back on that to you, but we are seeing some success. But we will hopefully be able to continue that and report back at the conclusion of that trial. Our grass cutting, as you've seen, is still continuing. Our summer prune has been partly delivered by our in-house team. ID Verdi have been supporting us with that, but we are looking to intensify what we do around winter prune, but we will keep you updated on that. It has been an unusual year. No, the borough doesn't look like it normally looks, but we are doing all we can to try and claim that back, claw that back over the next few months. And certainly we are, our engineers team have been inspecting and doing the work that is required around our hard surfaces, bridge inspections, etc. In terms of cemeteries, I think we prepared for the worst. It hasn't happened. In fact, we have seen a reduction in burials, so we are keeping an eye on that. But obviously, with the announcement by the government and the potential increase again in cases, we will keep an eye on that to ensure that we have resourced it to cover that. And again, a big thank you to our transport contractor who have been very good at keeping their service running and therefore keeping our service running and also doing the taxi licensing. Recycling centre is doing well, and I again was there the weekend, very busy, and our tree inspections continue. We have been doing some work around road signs, which members will be aware of, that where they're being blocked. Rachel is having I don't normally mention officers, but I will. Rachel Glover, our Head of Environmental Health, is having a week off, and I'm glad she is, because it's the service has been inundated with new guidance, things to do, things to consider, and also the major part of supporting our businesses and supporting this organisation to be able to operate safely. So we continue to do that with our businesses. The staff team are involved with test and trace, working with our partners at county, who are the lead authority for the responsibility for that. We are working very hard currently with a number of illegal evictions from private landlords. So although we don't have any powers, we certainly are a mediator to try and stop that happening at this time. And we know that the date for the protection that the government put in stops on the 30th of September. So it's important for us that we're in there trying to secure those tenants in those houses to continue. Work is still continuing on air quality at the junction with the 127, and I would imagine we will, in the next month or so, be coming back to members with an outline of what will be happening there, but we are waiting for confirmation from DEFRA. And as I say, there have been a number of significant increase in complaints to environmental health, mainly around private landlords, illegal eviction, noise, as well as, sadly, some related complaints regarding retail, hospitality, and leisure facilities. That, of course, led to a delay in some of the programme, which I've highlighted a couple of bits there. But we have this week, a new member of staff has arrived in the team to start picking up HMO identification and licensing, and we are doing some stuff online for them to be able to do that. But obviously we will catch up on that. And food inspections are starting with social distancing. Culture and health, probably the largest area that's been impacted on income. The theatre is going to be difficult to reopen at the current time. The staff are doing a very good job of moving stuff about, and I have taken the decision that pantomime will not be continuing this year and is postponed until next year, as we will not be able to ensure a COVID-safe facility during that period. We will be doing some small tryout shows, a kids magic show in October, subject to nothing changing. But obviously it is particularly difficult with 2-metre social distancing and use of toilets and keeping touch points clean. But the staff are, and certainly the manager is looking at a plethora of different ways to make sure, or to find a way for us to open. Our leisure centres have reopened. That was done on a phased basis, but now the swimming pool is also open at Sporting Village and at Wickford, and swimming lessons have commenced for young people. Our athletics track has been replaced, and unfortunately we haven't been able to do our normal hurrah. What a wonderful job. It does look fantastic, but that is now reopened. We're waiting for our mark for inspection. But we will look to be putting a lot more activity on that wonderful facility. But as with all things, their income is significantly down given the social distancing that's in place. It's a shame we don't charge for Parks and Countryside. I think it's they're busier than they've ever been. So our open space is seeing a high increase. And certainly we've had to increase on our We're Cleaning Up campaign, which some of you may have seen, where people have been dumping quite a lot of rubbish in the parks when bins are full. We are also looking at football and cricket pitches that have returned, and we're trying to make sure we can keep sport going. The biggest, I think, challenge for Grant, who is leading this part of the business, is our community facilities. They are excellent facilities and were fit for purpose prior to COVID. Once we start talking around ventilation and air circulation for people doing physical activity in a community centre, unfortunately, opening a window is not sufficient, and it has proved very, very difficult to reopen centres, our own and those that are leased out, to be able to take activity. This also ensuring that the water systems are safe and protected from Legionella. These are all a challenge for buildings that are used by our community. We continue to try and work, but I have to say this is probably the most challenging part of reopening our buildings. So I'm quite happy to take any questions, but I'd just like to say thank you to those members that have contacted my team, to thank them for their work, because that's always very good and certainly motivates the team at such a tough time. But thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brace. Before I bring members in, can I just add my thanks to Mr. Brace, all of his staff. A lot of work has gone in over the last few months, and especially over the last month, in getting all things sorted out. Finally, I think we're in a pretty good position, other than the finances, but we will get to that hopefully, and we'll sort some of that out later in the year. But I think what's gone on, and the staff have been absolutely brilliant right across the board, even down to the guys organising and looking after Barleyland's tip down there on the job. And Rachel Glover and the environmental health team have been outstanding in the task they've had to perform right across the borough, dealing with so many aspects which have been forced onto them by government legislation for COVID. So I'd like to place on record our thanks for that. I'm sure all members would agree. Can I just comment on the car parks? Mr. Brace did mention, and I have asked Mr. Hendry if we can start looking at introducing the 12 noon to 12:30 charge we agreed if necessary, because I've had numerous complaints over the last 2 to 3 weeks of Billericay car park being used by all day, but it's much smaller as well, by all day parkers, and also Wickford at times being 90% full when the high street isn't very busy. And I think some people have come to me and said they've driven into the car park, couldn't see a visible space, so went away when they only wanted to go into the high street. Now, we need to make sure if we're giving a free park until the end of the year, that it's to encourage people to use our high streets. And I think we should make sure we're in a position to do that. Hopefully other members Wickford members and Billericay members would agree with that across the board. So I'll bring Councillor Buckley in first of all. We did indicate. Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'll start off by saying that I think staff in the public sector as a whole have done a marvellous job during the pandemic. And I'm not going to mention each of the individuals by name, but we're all aware of the challenges that are met by the borough officers and indeed by the county officers, the health service, the police force and so on. And without those people, I'm sure we'd have been in a dreadful state. So thanks to all of those. I was also going to mention the car park, which you've also mentioned. And like you, I've had a few complaints about it seemingly being full, and I've been down there myself. As I've mentioned to you in the past, I normally go early mornings, but for a variety of different reasons, I've been going later in the day. And it has been much more difficult to find a place to park. And I'm very reluctant to introduce charging, and you know, it's something I don't really want to do, although I accept it may be a necessity to do so. And I just wonder whether we can deal with it for, say, a 4-hour maximum parking period or something like that. And I'm not saying necessarily it could be delivered, but I did mention, I can't remember whether it was to Mr. Hendry or to Mr. Brace, that down in the West Country when I went there, sorry, down in the Lake District, sorry, when I went there a few months ago, the people there, or the parish councils there, supplied something very similar to a disabled person's parking disc. It's sponsored by the parish council, but that you displayed in the window and you could park for 2 hours, and if it's gone past the 2 hours, you got a ticket, resident or not. So there are other ways we can achieve the same gain. And I think, bearing in mind, like probably others, I've listened to the Prime Minister and I've listened to the 2 experts over the last couple of days. I don't think this is going to be going away by January. And I think we may be having to look at longer term than that. So I think perhaps we need to investigate, is there a better way of dealing with it? The other points I wanted to mention, Mr. Brace mentioned about the grass cutting. A question on that really, we used to have a fixed number of cuts per year that were paid for in the budget. For some reason, 14 or 16 is in my head, it might be totally wrong. And given that we had the period with COVID, are we going to deliver the full amount of those, or will we be able to get an extra cut in to try and tidy up some of the bits which understandably are not as good as they would the swimming pool. I did go to Wickford swimming pool about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they had lane swimming at the time. And purely as an individual, I didn't feel comfortable. I thought the lanes were too narrow. So, welcome views on that. They probably do meet the legal requirements, but I felt if you swam up one side and somebody swam down the other side, especially with the splashing and spraying of the water, it felt too near. Last point I wanted to make, generally speaking, our parks and so on, I think are very good. But and I'm sure you've had the same sort of complaints, Chairman, about particularly the football teams leaving their litter behind. And obviously we know who the football teams are because they pay a fee to hire the pitch. And I wonder if we can, one, emphasise to those clubs or teams the need to clear up after themselves. And secondly, can we penalise them if they don't? So I'll shut up there, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. First of all, on the car parking, we're a little bit tired by the fact that the committee made a decision, which was to give Mr. Brace, in consultation with myself, to change it, and it did say 12 to 12:30. I will agree with you on this because I've spoken to Mr. Hendry about the new machines and being programmed in, and that may be difficult to program into a 12 to 12:30 and decide what tickets you issue and which ones whether you issue tickets at all. I think it would be better if we could do it for a fixed period where everyone takes a ticket. That would be necessary with a time on it, so you know when the time comes up. During this time, the SEP people in the high street, the patrols, have been going into the car parks to give an assessment on the usage. And if Mr. Hendry can come back on that if he wishes, but he's given me the figures of the percentage uses, and that is why 2.5 weeks ago I did ask that we started looking at what we could do to implement a way of preventing the commuter parking. Billericay was hit quite hard, is being hit quite hard by it, because it's a much smaller car park, as you're aware. And once that fills up, there's limited space then for shoppers. So I think we need to look at that. So it might well need, from this COVID impact assessment report, that we might have a recommendation. So I think that it should be a committee decision to give Mr. Brace, in consultation with myself, to implement a method of preventing the commuter car parking, the all days. Are you with me? Which could be what you're suggesting. It may be slightly different, but a better way of doing it, and one which is easy to operate within the new machines in the car park. And there was another one you mentioned, and on the football teams in the parks, yes, I've had numerous complaints, and I think Mr. Taylor is on the call as well tonight, and he will tell you that I approached him about 10 days ago now, and the football teams operating in the park, they were being spoken to or emailed, the clubs, not the particular managers, and asked or told that they should clean up after their matches, either take their waste home if the bins were full, or place them in the bins. And that's been instructions, I understand it, and Mr. Taylor will no doubt come on and confirm it, has been carried out. And I understand there were 6 matches going on in the Memorial Park in Wickford on Sunday, and some cleaned up and some didn't. So that's on those points. And Mr. Brace, do you wish to come in on, or Mr. Taylor on the swimming pool one? I'm waiting for an offer.
Apologies, sorry, I was trying to get the buttons working. I recognise what Councillor Buckley said there. I mean, he's quite right. It's meeting the expectations of Swim England. But I will take that up with everyone active to discuss with them and see if anyone else has been making reparations like that. It's not been made aware of that. But we'll take that up with them, councillor. That's okay.
Thank you. Any other member?
I think there was just a question about grass
Right, Chair,
cuts.
there's a
Sorry.
grass, yeah.
Yeah.
Apologise.
So, in answer to your question, councillor, it is 10 cuts. The contract says 8+2 if we ask for them. We've never not asked for the 2, I don't think. Certainly my tenure, we've done them all. So we intend to do 10 cuts by the end of the year. We will take another view of what the borough looks like as to what we can do and what we won't do. It will look slightly better. I think it's being hampered by the issue of weeds at the moment, which is something that we are trying to solve, but I don't necessarily want to go into a long conversation about weed killing at the moment, because I've got to try and come up with a solution for it that complies with all the things we need to comply with and is affordable. So we are working on that as we speak. The borough, please stay with us. The borough will look better than it currently does at the moment, and we are working on it. But rest assured, Verdi will do all they can to assist us in that.
So could I just ask how many cuts are actually left to be done?
Hugh, do you know how many are left?
Evening all. We complete the grass cutting by the end of October, and it's a 3-week cycle. So we've got another 2 cuts till the end of the cutting season.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Thank you very much. Councillor Davis, I think you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to, we could reiterate why the crunch service remains suspended. I know I've had casework where people have asked for it to be reinstated. I know there was issues when the was having queues at the recycling facilities. What's the current thinking on that?
The issue when we book for special collection is we know what's coming. We know what we're picking up. With the crunch service, we don't know what's turning up. We don't know how many people will be turning up. So we can't therefore manage our team. And it isn't a separate team. It's the team of our core staff. So it will be additional hours for people that have already worked during the week. So they are working harder during the week. So we've taken the decision that the risk to them in not knowing what's coming in, bearing in mind that some waste, if it's infected, needs to be sealed for 72 hours, all that kind of stuff, that we're exposing ourselves, or our staff actually, to far more risk because we don't know what's coming. We can't really risk assess it and find a safe way of doing it. And equally, we are putting all sorts of waste in the wrong places when it turns up at a crunch site. So until we know that we can manage the risks, then we would bring it back. But at the moment, as I said, we're concentrating on the core services, which is from the doorstep, which is why we've put additional resource into collecting from the doorstep in terms of special collections. But our core team must go to the house. We have to collect waste from the house. The crunch is an additional service. I know it's very valued, but ultimately it's a bit risky for us at the moment. It's easier at the county tip site, which is now open. We've also got Barleylands open. So there are other places for that waste to go that don't present as much of a risk because it's the resident dealing with it themselves, whereas we have to handle that waste going into the various vehicles. So that's the reason why.
I think the other point also is, and perhaps I shouldn't be saying this perhaps, but also it's getting more and more difficult to dispose of what's in the crunch vehicles because of the different variety of stuff that's in there, and therefore the cost to the council could be quite expensive in having it sorted first of all, because it's becoming even more likely that where we take our waste, it has to be sorted first of all, and there's recyclable stuff in there which will not meet the requirements when we get down to the full details of the environmental bill when it becomes legislation. It's a very complicated process, waste, and we're going to come to that shortly. Councillor Holliman, I think you indicated.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a general question really, which covers, I think, two of these areas. But it's a point of clarification really on the waste classification and separation. If we were dealing with a typical clinical environment, the waste that's produced there will be classed as clinical waste. And as such, it would need to be treated as such as a clinical waste. Now, if any of what we're being told is even partially true from the government, then people who are wearing masks are breathing out highly infective germs, viruses, and everything else into a collection, which is a mask, which is then disposed of in household waste. In addition, as we've all seen, I'm pretty sure if you walk down Wickford High Street, you'll see masks discarded all over the place on the street and everywhere else. And they're certainly within the waste bins. So my question was for clarification: if a mask in a hospital environment or a doctor's environment is a clinical waste and is handled as such, surely any mask, whether we know it or not, that's being picked up in domestic waste should be treated as clinical waste. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Holliman. I mean, the advice which I've seen given out is that used gloves and masks should be disposed of in your black sacks. That's the advice I've seen given out. But I think you've raised a very, very interesting point, because I agree some people are putting them, or so I'm told, putting them in the waste bins in high streets, etc. They go into a black sack, but at that point in time, it's an open black sack in a public place. I don't know if you wish to comment, Mr. Brace.
It's a challenging area, and certainly what the guidance has not clearly won't have reached every resident. It's complex guidance of quite a few pages. The fact is, if you have, and Councillor Holliman is right, it's technically is clinical waste, but if you've used gloves or a mask, they need to be put in your refuse, your black refuse, sealed and left for 72 hours and then put out for collection. Now that's not heard, and that's why the main reason we are trying to protect our staff as best we can out on the road with hand sanitizers, etc., to make sure they are at as limited risk as we can. But it is not risk-free, and that's has to be very clear. And we hope that residents and people do think about what they're doing with their various masks, gloves, etc. And the vast majority are doing exactly that, obviously, but there are still, as I've noticed, the new litter of PPE across the borough. So yes, it is a risk and should be treated, and therefore we, as I've spoken to Councillor Harrison, if we do some enforcement and we need to inspect sacks, we pick them up and we hold them for 72 hours before we can open them to inspect. So we are doing all we can to protect our staff. Unfortunately, it is guidance. It could, yes, it should be clinical waste, but there would be no way of being able to deliver that.
I think we need to ensure our communications team, the council, pushes that advice out frequently and often.
Can I just come back one quick thing on that? I don't want to pursue this beyond its point, because I think the basis of what I'm talking about really has been taken up very adequately by all members here. But I will push the point slightly by saying that if the classification of this is clinical waste by its pure definition, then shouldn't that be disposed of in exactly the same way as clinical waste under any medical condition, in the same disposable bins? I know for a fact that obviously doctors, surgeries, etc., have these bio bins, which are designed so you can put stuff in and it doesn't come out, and they're a solid, rigid plastic. Because to me, the obvious thing is that if we've got a weekly collection, and people are supposed to be wearing a mask for only so many hours, a household of 5 or 6 people, you could have several hundred masks in there by the end of the day in a black plastic sack, which could quite easily split open, with the particular biohazard that is in create for everybody and every surface in that area. And this is the very reason why you have bio bins for a clinical waste. So this material is either a clinical waste or it's not a clinical waste. And the implication is if we as a council are saying this is not clinical waste, then that throws a spanner into the government saying that this is such a disastrous disease that is encompassing the whole world at the moment.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Holliman. We don't want to get into debate about that here tonight. Can I say that Mr. Brace and myself, we will look into this to see, obviously, if what we're doing is, I'm sure it is within the guidance, because Rachel has been very clear on making sure the council adheres to the guidance given by the government on various matters right across the council. Mr. Brace.
Just to clarify, it is not classed as, so domestic face masks, which they're not clinical face masks, they're mostly domestic face masks, and gloves are not clinical waste, they are offensive waste, and therefore can be dealt with within a black sack. Within a hospital environment, that's doctors, surgeries, etc. That's completely different, but it is classified as offensive waste, which is why it can be dealt with via a black sack, and government guidance has said those sacks should be held for 72 hours, whether that's by us or whether that is by the resident before they're put out domestically.
But it is still a biohazard.
No, Peter Hunt, Cancer, please. That's enough for that now. I'm going to bring Mr. Councillor Blake in first of all, who's indicated he wishes to speak, and then we're going to deal with the recommendation I'm going to make on this item. Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I want to make a comment of to thank you for your personal invite for me to come to this meeting tonight. It really was much appreciated, and only too happy to accept. Totally agree with your sentiments regarding Rachel and her whole team, and I'll further add to that literally the whole cleansing team and grass cutting team. They're doing a wonderful job. Certainly in the area that I live in, over in the Charlton estate, the Pride team now are doing it's really starting to look good, and we're getting good comments, which is really nice to have. So I possibly do agree with you about the parking. Going to be very probably unpopular parking in Billericay, putting a charge in for that half hour, because it's just taking trade away from the town centre, and that's what the car park's there to bring people into the town centre, and not for the people to be parking there to go up to for the commuters. So fully agree with that. They're doing a great job. What I would like to say, I do disagree. I don't often disagree with Mr. Brace, but I will disagree with him. I think there's still a possibility of a pantomime in the Towngate Theatre. It's called a full council meeting, so you might want to think about that. But other than that, the team are doing a grand job, and thanks very much. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. It's funny, there was a suggestion last night made to me by another person that you could have a pantomime. It would be called the council meeting, and that was by a member of the public. So they're thinking like you, obviously. Can I move on then? On COVID-19 impact assessment, can I add to this the recommendation on the car parking in our council car parks that we give the authority to the Assistant Director of Public Spaces in consultation with myself to review and put in a charge to prevent all-day parking as necessary. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, thanks. I'm quite happy to second that, Chairman, if you wish me to formally do so. What I would ask, though, is that if the decision is made to impose a charge or to impose a time limit, and as I'd prefer the time limit, can we make sure that we give adequate notice to the public?
I agree. You will. Don't worry. Councillor Ferguson, did you wish to come in?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to, like others have done already, pass my own thanks on to Mr. Brace and the team for all the work that's been taking place. I think you've all done an absolute phenomenal job over the last 6 months in incredibly difficult circumstances, and completely echo the comments from Councillor Blake about how well the grass cutting and the pride team's work, particularly over at Cheltenham, has been done recently, and thank all the residents there for coming forward and asking about that. And I'm pleased to see the work's been undertaken. But yeah, like others have done, and like others have said tonight, I think you've worked incredibly hard and incredibly well under incredibly difficult circumstances. And my thanks to you all for doing so.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Mr. Brace, did you wish to come back in?
No, just thank you, councillors, and certainly some of your comments and views. We will be taking those on board and communicating those with my staff. But certainly, if there are any issues in your area, please come through councillor inquiries. Our team are picking them up. Again, thank you for your support. It does mean a lot to the team. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brace. Can I just run down then on the recommendation I've just suggested? We need to vote those in favour. I'm in favour. Councillor Davis?
In favour.
Councillor Buckley? It's that mute button.
Yeah. Well, somebody will train us to operate the computer one day. In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson?
In favour.
Councillor Holliman?
Yep, favour.
Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Now we move on to item 5, the Waste Strategy Delivery Plan. There's a very full document.
Chairman, I think you missed out Don then.
Have I missed something out?
You did, yes.
Oh, so
I'm in favour, Chairman.
who did I miss out? Oh, sorry, Don. I didn't see you up the top
Right.
of the corner. I apologise.
Right.
You're in favour.
No, I'm in favour.
Sorry, I apologise. Accept my apology, please. Item 5, Waste Strategy, the delivery plan. It's pages 9 to 28. It's a comprehensive report. At this stage, I mean, remember in November last year, this committee unanimously approved the strategic goals and principles of our revised waste strategy for the borough. We agreed the delivery plan that it should be brought to a future committee for approval. This is the first phase of that. Now, there's a detailed report there. I'll ask Mr. Hendry or Mr. Brace. I'm not sure who's going to run through it tonight, but the main purpose of the first phase is to the segregation of garden and food waste from the green bins. This will be a requirement by law. It's in the environmental bill, which is going through Parliament at the moment. It's also a fact and a probability that in the very near future, there will be insufficient firms that will take it in the current form of being mixed. So we need to act on that as well. And we wish to set up a cross-party group of members to oversee the progress towards the delivery of the waste and recycling strategy from 2020 to 2025. That's the strategy, not the length of the working group necessarily. And to look at legislative and operational changes required to deliver against the requirements of the environmental bill, with the first area to be reviewed being garden waste collections and the provision of liners for food waste collections, and to come back with a report to the November committee. The suggestion, which is open to debate, for the membership of that committee will be 2 Conservative members, 3 members from the Basil and Borough Alliance, Councillor Blake and myself as chairman of the working group. And I would suggest that there are no other committee members of the committee on that. We bring in some backbench members from the other places. My reason for asking and including Councillor Blake is purely for one reason only. Councillor Blake was the former chairman of this committee in the last administration. He knows about what was required because the waste strategy in effect was beginning to roll when he was as a chairman. And I think it would be nonsense not to use his expertise on such a working group. This is my personal view, and people may disagree with that, but I think it will be useful because this is a very complicated process. I've only realised this probably in the last 4 or 5 months. We're going through the full details with officers, what's involved, and we've got to this stage, and it's an area where we have to move forward because the government will very soon be telling us what we have to do. So that's the main parts of what we need to do tonight. And I'll now ask Mr. Hendry or Mr. Brace, which one's going to go through with it first of all? Mr. Hendry, I think.
I'm happy to pick up from here, Chairman. Thank you.
I'll leave it to you when you run through what you need to, James, and then we'll pick up afterwards.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to reiterate Councillor Harrison's points there, this is building on the decision which was made at November's committee last year around the delivery of the waste strategy for the borough. At the time, we were talking about this being a long-term view of the way that we manage and treat waste in light of some particular pressures on us as a service, on local authorities across the country and across us and within the region as well. And I have put some of the background of the strategy in there, and on page 10 and 11, the 4 key drivers for the changes were around policy changes, the environment bills coming in, growth within the borough, resident interest in the environment by way of things like Attenborough and Blue Planet, and increased interest in plastic and so on, and also uncertain finances for local authorities in the future. So what we have got here is there are a number of drivers, which is why we need to take on garden and food waste as the first element of this. And as we outlined initially, this is a long-term plan. We've put things in place over the next 5 years to set us up for the next 10 years and beyond. And I think that at the previous committee meetings, we've spoken about how the service has changed and would be very recognisable to those who were working within it 20, 30 years ago. Pieces have been added on in an ad hoc manner over the years. And this is a fundamental review of the way we deliver waste to build upon for the future, to build a better environment for the Basildon Borough and one that delivers for our residents. So the national drivers for service change are particularly focused around the circular economy package, which was agreed this year, which mandates recycling targets of 55% by 2025, 60% by 2030, and 65% by 2035. So they are ambitious based on where we are now. We know, because of the work that we've done before, that over a third of our residual waste is food waste. We know that a big chunk of what we're getting in our black bags is about 60% of that is currently recyclable through our existing schemes. We know that the way that we're collecting the organic waste at the moment isn't capturing a lot of that material. The Environment Bill, as it is currently drafted, it's currently at the committee stage within the House of Commons, is going to mandate, as it's written currently, it mandates separation of food and garden waste. So that's something that is looking like coming down the path to us at some point. Additionally, there are regional changes because the likelihood is that food and garden waste is going to be split out. The market for that mixed material is not getting the investment that it needs to retain the capacity that it currently has to maintain that level. That means that there are fewer and fewer providers that can manage mixed garden and food waste together. That is then going to force our hand sooner to say we need to separate those two materials out. Additionally, the cost of processing those materials together, as borne by Essex County Council, so not directly affecting us, but obviously affecting Essex taxpayers, is on page 14 as well, that there is a differential between around £50 for mixed food and garden waste per tonne. Food waste on its own is around £10 per tonne, and garden waste on its own is around £25 per tonne, but that is not the key driver here. The key driver is that capacity for that material is disappearing, which could lead us with in as soon as a year's time, not having an outlet for that material and requiring the segregated material to be sent for landfill processing rather than any form of recycling, which is obviously against our recycling targets as already written. Locally, and I've already touched upon this, we do have the highest waste arisings in Essex. 62% of what goes into our residual waste is could be recycled through our existing schemes. As I mentioned before, 35.9% is food waste, so it's slightly higher than the number I said before. So that's over a third of what's going into our black bags is food waste. Put plainly, we aren't capturing it through our existing collection materials. I think if I skip to page 15, it does show that our recycling rate over the years, we peaked a few years ago, but changes in consumer habits have caused that to fall back. People are buying less newspapers, we're getting more cardboard, we are getting more glass as a result of the pandemic, particularly this year, but we aren't capturing all of the materials we could be capturing. I think we've highlighted on page 16 and 17 what our potential recycling rate could be given where we are currently. And also, I think it's worth highlighting that we have the highest waste arisings of any authority in Essex as well. So per capita, we're running at about a tonne per household. Put plainly, it's time for us to change and embed some of the vision that we've got for the borough around being ambitious and green and improving our environmental credentials for the borough for the future. We've talked within this report around implementing the waste hierarchy. Top of the waste hierarchy is waste prevention. We know that through talking to other authorities that segregation of food waste leads to changes in behaviours. So that's good for our residents, that's good for the environment. It means less wasted food, which is obviously where we want to get to. So we may have seen things like the Love Food, Hate Waste campaign. I know that it's something that we had a few years ago when we introduced the mixed garden and food waste collections. We had a real spike in tonnage, which then dropped back. And that material didn't go back into the residual waste. It just disappeared because people would change their habits. They'd say, okay, I'm buying more fruit than I need to. I'm buying 2 bags of bananas a week. I don't need them. I'm only going to buy 1 next week because they've realized that. So it does change the behaviors here. So the waste hierarchy is important. Ideally, we want to prevent the waste from occurring. If we can't, we'll reuse it. If we can't reuse it, we'll compost it, and then other recovery, and then disposal as being the last option. So implementing that waste hierarchy to manage the materials as high up as possible is key. We've also put in this report around our commitment to looking at electric vehicles as well, which is something that we've spoken about previously. It's something that is ambitious for the borough, will help to reduce the amount of emissions that we've got as well, help to reduce our carbon footprint as well. So the proposals as contained within the collection report, and there is a lot of context here, so I won't be going through everything in detail, but I will be available to obviously to answer questions. That we segregate we set up a working group with the idea that we will look at the way that we collect food and garden waste within the borough, but we maintain the principle tonight that the food and garden waste will need to be segregated, subject to becoming a legislative requirement within the draft environment bill from 21-22. So that aligns with the regional directive as well as the national imperative there as well. Recommendation 2 is that the principle of providing a weekly curbside collection of food waste with collections to start in September 2021 is approved, subject to this becoming a legislative requirement, again, within the forthcoming Environment Bill. There are likely to be capital and revenue expenditure required to get there, to deliver those changes. So we're asking for approval for that today as well. And I think one of the things, particularly to pick up a point that Councillor Harrison made in November last year when this item came up the first time, and we had that really healthy conversation as a committee around this, is that we talked about this being something that is not just for now. This isn't about short term, this is about legacy. This is about building for the environment and putting a marker down to say, Basildon leads. We do not follow on this. We are doing what we can do for the environment to improve our environmental performance for the long term. And the way to do that is not about building things together. And what we've tried to do when putting together this report and all the work that we've done on building the strategy so far is to bring people in to have conversations. And I think one of the really good recommendations that's on here today is around that creation, as Councillor Harrison mentioned previously, around creating a working group to look at the issues, to look at what's coming down the pipeline for us. We have the opportunity to be out ahead of this and to show off what Basildon can be in terms of our commitment to the environment and how we can do better in the future. And I think the creation of the working group of elected members is the recommendation that's on there, to look at legislative and operational changes, to have that oversight and that interest and that visibility, to go on the same journey that we've been able to do as officers by talking to other authorities and seeing what best practice looks like as well. The first area to be looked at is around garden waste collections. Within, we currently collect garden waste mixed in with the food waste. I've already explained why that is not likely to be a realistic scenario for too long due to the pressures that we're facing regionally and nationally. So it makes sense for that working group to be set up to then look at the garden waste collections and make some recommendations as to potential service design models in the future, to then report back to this committee at the next committee meeting in November. And the last recommendation there is that the committee is asked to commit to the legislative requirement of a recycling rate of 65% by 2035, which is legislation which is within the circular economy package, which is then expected to be made part of the environment bill as that comes to fruition, as it's currently at committee stage in the House of Commons. So there's quite a lot of information on there, but I am prepared to take questions as needed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hendry. Before we go to that, can I just make a couple of more comments? Within the report, having talked to other members and across various areas of the borough, and also Mr. Hendry, other people, it's clear that about 15% of the borough needs to have a different collection method of its waste than the other 85% of the borough. We need now to identify that 15% where a different type of doorstep collection is carried out. So within this report, when we identify the areas, that's taking place with officers now, we set up focus groups in those areas as the best way of doing it. It's communal areas, it's flats, it's whatever, but the areas which are difficult for our vehicles to do doorside collections or doorstep collections. And that's within this report as well. The other important part of this report is on page 12, which is the timescale that what we expect to happen. But included in that is in October, we will be awarding a contract for route optimization technology as a part of the council's digital strategy. But in January, we'll be looking for an additional £500,000 of annual investment if the current collection model of our dry recyclables carries on. In April next year, we want to see the route optimization technology fully implemented so that by July next year, there's in-cab technology in all of our refuse collection vehicles. And then following on, before the environmental bill comes in, there's a government scheme for a deposit return scheme to go live, and we will be aiming to play our part in that across the borough. So I think there's important decisions coming ahead, and I think it's one on waste where we need to take all 42 councillors with us on this. There will be differences of opinion on various little parts of it, but it's important because unless we do this properly and we carry on doing it properly, the borough will suffer, the environment will suffer, and it will be to, I think, a bad legacy from our particular era on the council for the people who are here in the 2035 when this comes to fruition. I probably won't be around, but at least we've got a part to play to ensure that happens. I'll bring in, first of all, Councillor Holliman, his hand up first.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Again, just another very quick question, really, to look at, again, the implications of where we are in terms of the pandemic that we've got at the moment. And we've got this situation of lockdown and also home working. And I'm just wondering if anybody's made any sort of impact assessments or provisions for the type of waste and the quantity of waste changing as a result of more people now both working from home, potentially creating paperwork, plastics, also eating at home. So presumably the food waste is going to go up. I mean, I haven't got a clue myself, but I'm wondering whether this has been fed into the system to say what if and what should we be providing for. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. No in-principle issues with the working group, although from your description of it, it does seem like it's the entire committee, but not meeting as a formal committee.
No.
You can take that as a criticism or not, as you may wish.
On committee member.
I do have a number of points to make on the report and the recommendations on a whole.
Councillor Buckley, I'm going to come back on that first of all before we lose the point. The recommendation I made was it's going to consist of 7 members, of which 5 or 6 will not currently be members of this committee, but as of next week, 5 will not be members of this committee. So that is hardly to say is made up of this committee. It will not be made up of this committee.
I misunderstood your comments then, Chairman. You said nominees of the Alliance and nominees of the Conservative group plus Councillor Blake.
No, who are not on this committee.
That as the groups would nominate who they chose.
Councillor Buckley, please, you must listen. I know now you lose your emails, but don't lose what I'm saying, and I said at the beginning is perfectly clear. I did say that it was made up of 2 members of the Conservative group, 3 members of the Alliance, who are not members of the committee, plus Councillor Blake, and I gave the reasons for Councillor Blake, and myself as chair.
Yeah, I have no issues with that membership. Say I understood what you said as being nominees of the various group leaders. If that's not the case, we're fine. As I say, there are important issues, and that's something that will happen in the background, and this committee will decide on its recommendations in any event. Mr. Brace mentioned about, sorry, it might have been Mr. Hendry, sorry, mentioned about route optimisation for the waste collections. I just want to highlight an issue from the time when I had the portfolio some years ago. And at that time, I also happened to sit on a panel with the bus operators. The most optimum route at that time meant that the refuse vehicles were on the main roads at peak time for schools and were delaying the buses. So what the sat-nav, if that's what it turns out to be, says, sometimes needs to be overruled. So I would just ask to ensure that the management of those routes takes into account the fact that we can impede bus routes in particular, and as I'm sure you're well aware, the government, the county councillors, the Highways Authority are trying to encourage people to use buses amongst other forms of transport. So I'm keen to make sure that they don't get deterred from doing so. I think you rightly mentioned one of the challenges, which is about the type of accommodation that we have in the borough. And I was particularly focused on flats, which have always been a problem to get them to participate in recycling, more so perhaps than just general waste. There's been a tendency for them to be a couple of paladins in a rather unattractive shed somewhere away from where people live. So that is something that's going to need to be managed. Now, I think it is something where perhaps this committee or its officers should be saying to the planning department, in the light of plans that current administration has, and I'm not going to talk about the merits or otherwise of those now, but if we are going to have blocks of flats in places like the town centre, then we do need a way of managing the waste and refuse that comes from those people. I don't know what the solution to it is, but it needs to be looked at before the flats are built. I also made a note about textiles, and every year we get a few stickers around about Christmas time. Mine seem to arrive to stick on bags to say this is textiles. They tend to get put in a drawer and a bit lost. Maybe you're more efficient than I am at that, but I think we perhaps need to reflect on, are we collecting textiles the right way? Or should we just be encouraging people to use the textile banks that are dotted around the borough? Again, I'm open on that, but I'm not convinced we're fully using that as efficiently as we can. The other thing is the types and range of waste, and I would be interested to hear what officers got to say about the change in the waste profile over the period of the pandemic, because certainly I and probably others have ordered more online over the last few months than I have over an equivalent period in the past. And if you order something from a certain well-named company that seems to sell you almost everything, the amount of cardboard and packaging that comes with it is way beyond what is necessary. So is the profile of our waste changing that dramatically, albeit that may be recyclable waste? On your recommendations, a couple of observations, particularly relating to, and these are only observations, I'm not making a change on these particular points, but number 1 and number 2, you've said subject to becoming a legislative requirement in the forthcoming Environment Bill. It's actually the right thing to do, is to separate the waste, because it's right for the environment, it's less costly for us to deal with. And I think, frankly, on recommendation 1 and 2, you could just delete the reference to the Environment Bill, because it's something we should be doing anyway. On the other recommendations, you've mentioned about the cross-party group, and I would just like to add an amendment to, or an addendum really, to that one, and that's to say, on the basis of free weekly garden waste continuing, to minimise the effect of fly tipping. I think I'll have a seconder on that, on Councillor Morris. The final recommendation, number 5, which Mr. Hendry referred to, achieve the recycling rate target of 65% by 2035. My gut feeling is that is very unambitious. And I just point out, if you look at the chart that's in the report, in 2014, where it falls upon me to say I actually held the portfolio, we were recycling 53.5% at that time. It's gone down since, and I accept that there are some reasons for that change. But to say that it takes that long to get up to 65% when Rochford have been 60% plus in recent times, I think is seriously unambitious. And I think, again, I'm not going to amend it, but I would be very happy if you chose to delete the 2035, because I think it is a woefully unambitious target. So I'll leave it there, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Morris?
Yes, Chairman, I'm happy to second that. I will comment, as I go around, as I do, as you know, I'm getting around in a mobility scooter these days around, so I get to see the sacks quite close, black sacks, etc., quite closely. And it seems to me that Malcolm makes a point that our ambition is very low. We should be now recycling far more than we are at this present date. There are a lot of, I have to say this, I regret it, but people are lazy get complacent and they just chuck everything in black sacks, because you can see where there's cardboard in there, there's any amount of stuff in there, but a lot of cardboard, tins where they don't recycle, and we should be encouraging them if necessary. You know, instead of the all the sacks being picked up separately, we should actually go along, bang a notice on the sack outside the property, and a fine imposed, because people should be more environmentally conscious than they are. You know, we supply all this, we supply all the green bins, we supply all the equipment for them. They've got no excuse not to do it. You know, I personally have less than half a carrier bag of non-recycling, probably over and that's over a period of a fortnight. So it can be done. You just need to do it and get on with it.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Can I just comment on what Councillor Buckley has said so far? And Mr. Brace will want to come in on a couple of points, I think. On the recommendations 1 and 2, I happen to agree with you, Councillor Buckley, but the advice I've been given by legal officers is that unless we include that reference to the environmental bill, the nonsense would have to be you would go and have to consult on something you were going to have to do anyway, which I think is absolute nonsense, but that's the legal advice which we've been given. But I would have amended it in a different way to, it can be approved subject to that becoming law, but should it be operational required by September 2021, we carry it out, because we're running out of places where we can actually take the stuff to. So I'm happy to take your amendment. I'm happy to be criticised by the legal team who aren't present here tonight at a later date, and delete on both 1 and 2 everything after the word approved. An officer will no doubt come in very quickly to warn me, but
I think
Julie's got her hand up. Democratic Services advising me I'm being undemocratic.
If I may, Councillor. The legal advice was very clear on this. If the legislation comes in, then that's fine. If this recommendation is fine, the council can go ahead and make the changes. But if there is no legislative requirement to do it, you would need to consult the public, and therefore this recommendation wouldn't stand.
Well, can I say I'm going to totally disagree with that, because as I said previously, if operationally there was no place that would take at a reasonable price to this council the garden and food waste in one collection box or bin, we would have to do it operationally, and we would not consult on something you had to do operationally. Why would you consult? Because the only question would be, we haven't got a choice. We're going to separate food waste from garden waste. Do you agree? And if they say, no, we don't agree, so what? Because you've got to do it anyway. I see no point in a pointless consultation and expense to this council. That's all. So if we leave those words in, I would add the appropriate words that if the segregation of garden and food waste is required operationally to be commenced in September 2021, we approve it.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Chairman. It's simply because, as I said, it's the right thing to do financially and environmentally. And I personally, I think it's absolutely bonkers to go to consultation on something as simple as, do we collect your waste? You know,
I agree. But can I comment on the other part, Malcolm, which you said about a recommendation to change the cross-party working group? I would hope we could leave all those things out at this time and not say to the working group, this is what one of the things you must do, because let's wait and see what the options are. And after all those members of that working group have seen a report across the whole stage, because that's only the first stage. How we collect green waste is the next stage, and we're asking them to report on that. What's the point of having a report from a working group when you've already said you can report, but this is what this is the answer you're going to come up with?
It's only covering one aspect, Chairman. That's why I would like to see it remain in there. And I think it is something that's important. And you and I are both well aware of previous instances of fly tipping. And if you start charging people for it, you know what's going to happen. And if you don't do it regularly enough to get rid of it, you know what's going to happen. So I'd like that recommendation on the end of number 4 to stand. Obviously, the working group will be able to come back with its suggestions as it wishes, but it's including that as a factor within those recommendations.
Okay, Councillor Blake, you wish to come in. You're muted. I think he's having trouble with his mute. You're muted, Councillor Blake. The mute button is on. Okay, if we come back to...
I'm back. I think I'm back. Am I okay now?
Yeah,
I apologise for that. My computer went doolally then for a second. I just want to make a couple of points and say, totally, I'm very pleased to be on this working group indeed. But a couple of points, I like what James said earlier, and I think it's very important when he actually said we're going to lead on this, we're not going to follow. And I think that's excellent wording. The way that come across, because it's right, we should be doing that. And we may disagree on a couple of things on this as a conservative, as councillors overall. But I think it's very important that we show a united front on this when it comes to the final product, rather than nitpick and not vote because it's got one aspect in it you don't look at. I think we've got to look at the whole package and see if it comes out okay. I think it's like any political group. Nobody here actually believes in everything of their political party that they put in their manifesto. So there might be times like that where that'd be very important to take an overall view. So I think that's very important. And something I should obviously like to be pushing, and all that is pushed, and I know you have, Chairman, is it's going to be all about education, and then hopefully if that doesn't go forward, and hopefully it will be listened to, it's then going to be about enforcement, in my view. But I think it's been very, very difficult to get some of the messages across, as we realise with COVID-19 now, a different fact to get across. But that will be something that'll be high on the agenda, the pushing out of the leaflets from the council, promotions from the council, please do this, we'll support you, you need any help, contact us. But you know what, after a certain period of time, if you then continue to do it, we're going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. So okay. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. Can I just say, I think also we need to communicate with the public better about what can be recycled, because there's so many different types of plastic, there's so many different types of symbols on food containers, on plastic containers, some which are recyclable, some which are not currently recyclable, some which say take it back to our major store and don't leave it in your recycle bin. We need to make it clear to the public what can be recycled right across the board. Councillor Buckley is quite right. There has been an increase in the amount of cardboard collected. If there hasn't, I'll be very surprised, but I've been told there has been a big amount of cardboard collected in recent months, and that is probably going to continue for a long time, I believe, so that's going to happen. I think the other thing that this cross-party working group would have to look at and consider when they're looking at the entirety, once we get past the garden waste and food waste separation, is not only the way we collect waste, but also the finance involved in the way we collect waste, because there's a financial responsibility to the council as well. So it's an overall package where you need to take people with you, and hopefully this is the start. Mr. Brace, he's moved from one side of my screen to the other.
I'm darting about, my apologies for that. Just on the recommendation, councillor, I don't know whether you want to add on or recommend or suggest that you may add on to the end of that would of course be subject to a community engagement programme, which would effectively be the point that you made, which was it can't be a consultation because we've got to do it, but there would need to be a community engagement programme, which I'm sure members would absolutely want to do. As you've just mentioned, the communication needs to be better. So that's a part of a recommendation.
I'm not sure what you're suggesting, actually. Are you suggesting we leave out subject to this becoming a part of the...
No, I'm saying add that on to the end of it where you've said that it's if it was required because for operational that it be approved, which would then be subject to a community engagement programme. Because if we had to do it, we would then go out to the public, So let's make it explicit in the recommendation.
I'm happy with that. Members understand that?
Right. What's the difference between community engagement and consultation?
Well, I think that's the point that Councillor Harrison made earlier, that we're not consulting because we'd have to do it, but we would be doing a community engagement programme. I think that's
information. We're informing people.
Yeah.
Which I think would be the right way to do it. We're giving them the reasons behind it as well. Are members happy with that approach? And Julie's checking the wording.
I'm just checking the wording.
So wording will be as now, with the adding on that if it's required for operational purposes to bring it in September 2021, it's approved and subject to the community engagement, a community engagement programme.
Yep.
And taking out about the legislative requirement.
No, the legislative requirement remains.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
So that may happen first, but we may, if we have to do it operationally, then that's approved and then would therefore be subject to a community engagement programme.
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay.
And secondly, it's just to bring a bit of challenge back to Councillor Buckley, but to all members generally, and I'll try and be the person that brings this up. If we're collecting green waste every week, what are we going to be doing in November, December, January and February with empty bins across the borough? That's just a challenge. And if we go back to the waste strategy that we've approved, we said that we would be driven by data. So we are gathering data at quite a large rate on all sorts of things: glass, cardboard, fly tipping, dumping, where it is. We've also got an enormous amount of data from other authorities that have implemented new systems around what's happened. And I think what we need to try and do is not have preconceived ideas of what does and doesn't happen. It is not proven that if we change our services, however they might be on waste, that fly tipping will go up. And we need to try and open our mind up to things that we might do and want to change that we may think causes a problem, but actually it may be something totally different. So I'd like members to sort of open their minds up to we will be driven by data. There will be a lot of data around this, and if we haven't got the data, we'll go away and find it for that working group and indeed for this committee. So it's just to try and open up and challenge some of potentially what is our preconceived ideas of what will and won't happen. And I have to be honest, because we're so far behind the curve on waste, so many other people have made many mistakes, which we have the fortunate ability to learn from. And one of those things is that the data has not been used to inform how services should be delivered. So that's really my challenge really for this committee, and will be the same for the working group, that we do need to look at data and take that into account when decisions are being made. So thank you.
Thank you. Now I intend to take the recommendations now. I'll take them separately because when I come to 4, I will take Councillor Buckley's amendment if he wishes to leave it there. So I'll take 1 and 2 as indicated to be amended to include the community engagement and the operational requirement. I'm in favour of those two recommendations as amended. Councillor Davis.
In favour.
Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Councillor Hollyman.
Yep, for.
And Councillor Buckley.
For.
And not forgetting Councillor Morris.
For.
Well, that's unanimous. Thank you. Item 3, that the capital and revenue expenditure required to deliver changes to food and garden waste services be approved. I'm in favour. Councillor Davis.
In favour.
Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Councillor Hollyman.
For.
Councillor Buckley.
For.
Councillor Morris.
For.
On item 4, as worded, except for the amendment which was moved by Councillor Buckley, which was, I think, to include that there should still be a weekly collection of green waste at no charge.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah, that's the gist of it, Chairman.
Yeah, okay. I think
It's got the exact words, but
well,
basically, as long as
enough to what you
says
said,
is free weekly waste, free weekly green waste, then that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. All those in favour will go round first. I will vote against that. Councillor Davis.
Against.
Councillor Ferguson.
Against.
Councillor Morris.
For.
Councillor Hollyman.
For.
Councillor Buckley.
For.
And I will use my casting vote against that amendment. So can we take the substantive item 4, which is that a cross-party working group of elected members be created to oversee the progress towards the delivery of the waste and recycling strategy 2020 to 2025, and to look at legislative and operational changes required to deliver against the requirements of the environmental bill, with the first areas to be reviewed being garden waste collections and the provision of liners for food waste collections to be reported back to the November 2020 Neighbourhoods and Public Spaces Committee. And the makeup of that working group, as I outlined earlier. I vote in favour of that. Councillor Davis.
In favour.
Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Councillor Morris.
In favour.
Councillor Hollyman.
Abstain.
Councillor Buckley.
Same.
That is carried. Item 5, that the commitment for the council to achieve the recycling target rate of 65% by 2035 as set out in the government circular economy package be approved. I vote in favour. Councillor Davis.
In favour.
Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Councillor Morris. Councillor Morris. He's muted. Councillor Morris.
Go back to him afterwards, Chairman.
Is that in favour? You're muted, Don. Right.
We should do him last.
I'll take that as an abstention. Councillor Buckley.
Abstain.
Councillor Hollyman.
For.
Councillor Morris.
Sorry, abstain.
Right. That is carried. Interesting, people not voting for their government's circular economy package. Stranger things are happening tonight.
Unambitious,
Right, we move on to the next item on the agenda. Street scene education enforcement trial update. That's on pages 29 to 34. The details are there, and I'll find it in a moment. There's so much paper here tonight. And I will be removing the recommendation to note the progress of the trial of expanded enforcement services and continue the 12-month trial. I think it's a fairly detailed report there of how it's operated. It has been successful. It isn't costing the council anything in finance. It's producing a small amount of income, and we are picking up and dealing with lots of enforcement of littering, and it's enabling our in-house enforcement team to work more efficiently in this issuing of FPNs for fly tipping, littering, etc., etc. Mr. Hendry, do you wish to expand on that at all?
Thank you, Chairman. I won't dwell for too long on this because you've just done a very good summary there. So the only thing I really need to add is obviously where there was a slight drop off during lockdown. As Paul said earlier on the item around the COVID, is that the team are fully operational. They're now fully staffed again, and they are back up and operational and operating across a number of different areas to support us and our in-house enforcement team. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Can I also add on this with the use of the CCTV, which we're able now to move around the borough. I think I'm correct that there were 11 cases of fly tipping in court. I don't know what the outcomes were. We don't wish to know that at this stage, but there were 11 before the court, I think, this week or last week, end of last week. I think I'm correct, Mr. Hendry.
That's correct. We had 11 cases at Magistrates Court last week. Yeah.
So, and that they have now been in operation for the last month, as we had to set up the system, the way to operate them. And it's now quite clear, if you fly tip, you will get caught. If you get caught, you will be fined or you will be prosecuted. So don't fly tip. You will be caught. We're making sure of it now across the borough. Okay, anybody else on this report? No? Okay, I'll go to the recommendations then.
Sorry, Chairman, I did just try to catch your eye there, but
you disappeared.
Yeah, I did wave and I tried to unmute, which is a challenge.
You're not on the video even at the moment, so it's a problem.
That's probably what went wrong. Okay, back to the fishing lake.
Over there now.
I just wanted to ask a question, really, because the period that we've been conducting this trial is over the pandemic, and a lot of people were locked down for a large part of that period. I'm pleased with the success of it, so I make no bones about that. But I just wonder whether, in the officer's opinion, the amount of fly tipping, litter dropping and so on was actually significantly reduced over that period, and whether they have a projection for the next few months.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson, I'll bring you in next, then Mr. Hendry can respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Hendry, for presenting the report. And I'm too pleased to see that the trial's been successful. I think any councillor will be able to comment on the amount of casework that they receive about fly tipping and dumping and action needing to be taken on that. And I'm pleased that we're making progress there. I'm also pleased that the trial here has also brought in other benefits to our in-house enforcement team, and Mr. Hendry will note that the frequency of emails that he receives from me about shopping trolleys and allowing us to tackle that and freeing up resource to be able to do that, I think is really important. So I'm pleased that the trial has been successful. I think there's work that can be developed on it. I'm pleased it's allowed us to tackle other areas that we've wanted to be able to tackle for a while. And similar to other items that I think we've discussed on this tonight, it's a lot of this also comes down to communication and sharing knowledge and information about this with our residents to take everyone on this journey with us together.
Absolutely, absolutely. Totally in agreement. Let's have no one else. Does anyone else want to come in? Mr. Hendry, did you wish to respond?
Yes, I'm happy to respond. Thank you, Chairman. In response to Councillor Buckley's point around fly tipping reports and levels, levels seem to be tracking pretty much where we were last year. Probably August is the peak month for fly tipping reports and removals. It tends to be in certain predictable times of the year around Easter and towards the end of the 6 weeks holiday when we do get the peaks. We're coming to the end of that now. In terms of the levels, they're probably slightly up on last financial year, but tracking it consistently with the levels that we'd seen in previous years. So there's not been any noticeable increase over the short term. What we are still getting is a lot of duplicate reports. So we're doing some work to look at the criteria against which we accept which reports come in, because we're getting around 50% of the reports that come through to us. We get to there's nothing there because they've already been, arranged as a special collection or something. So we have got duplication of effort there, which we're working to reduce as well. And I think that to Councillor Ferguson's point and around communication, I think it's right that we keep engaging with people, communicating. This is something that prevention being better than cure. We've done our communications team have done a lot of work around the anti-littering messages we've done in parks, promoting where we have had successful court cases, and I hope that these works carry on. Recently, I did a social media Q&A with residents, and it's useful to be able to feed back to people to say, well, here's what we have done, because I think it's our enforcement team are getting more aware of that as well, and it's making sure that they're sharing the success stories that we've had when we've done joint operations with the police, when we've stopped and searched, rogue traders, that we are pushing those messages out there to show that we are tough and that won't be accepted within the borough, and also highlighting where we're doing cross-boundary work with neighbouring authorities and those across Essex to bring rogue traders and dodgy house clearance companies and people like that to task. So it's also on all of us to be vigilant to make sure that we're checking waste carriers licenses of anybody that we may book to undertake work on our behalf.
Thank you, Mr. Hendry. Can I also point out that Mr. Hendry and others have been conducting these Facebook Live items on Facebook and talking to members of the public on environmental matters, cleaning up matters, and that has been very successful as well. I should also add that with the CCTV, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to identify a lot more people who fly tip, because we're now working on the basis of how to recognise those people who we have facial vision of the people who are fly tipping. We aim to make sure that fly tipping in this borough stops. There's various ways of doing it, and we are doing it in a legal way, and we'll continue to find the best way of catching the culprits. So on that recommendation to note the progress of the trial of expanded enforcement services, continue the 12-month trial. I'm in favour. Councillor Davis.
Favour.
Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Councillor Morris.
In favour.
You're moving around. Councillor Holliman.
For.
Councillor Buckley.
For.
I think that's everybody. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 7, permission to enter a service level agreement on abandoned vehicles within the borough. The report is there on pages 35 to 40. This is entering into agreement with Thurrock. Mr. Hendry.
Thank you, Chairman. This report details and asks for permission for us to engage in a service level agreement to procure an abandoned vehicle contractor alongside colleagues in Thurrock. Essentially, the current contract for abandoned and untaxed vehicles across the borough ends on the 30th of October. We've already used up the extension periods available to us. One of the things that we found is that individually, and this is through talking to colleagues at Thurrock as well, individually as a borough, we don't have the volume of vehicles that a lot of the greater London authorities have. A lot of the drivers and companies tend to be paid on a piece rate. They get paid on a commission for the amount of vehicles they lift. So what we want to do is to try and build up and shore up the level of vehicles within both our boundaries. So within Basildon and Thurrock, there will be enough work for that to make that worth its while for a contractor, rather than scrapping around and fighting for scraps from a driver. We're also aiming to include the ability to remove vehicles on council-owned HRA land as well, and just trying to really shore up the existing arrangements that we've got. The outgoing contractor, the contracts we've had for the last few years, has been very good. They've worked very well for us. We've had no issues with the DVLA in terms of compliance. Their facility is very, very good, but this is for to give us permission to enter into that service level agreement. The decision to enter into this framework needs to come through a committee in order to allow us to do that, which is what we're doing today. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hendry. This is a straightforward decision. Any member wish to comment? Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question for Mr. Hendry. I read the bit about the London boroughs effectively having more dump vehicles, so therefore more profit and whatever for the organisations. No problem at all with working with Thurrock, but could we actually be looking at a wider project? Yeah, a cellar has been talked about as a region, and I'm sure places like Canvey, Castle Point, Southend, those sorts of places have similar problems. Is there actually a benefit to us in teaming up with more than just one authority?
Mr. Hendry.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Buckley, for your question there. And I think from small acorns, mighty trees grow. So hopefully this may be the start of something, obviously, as we were talking previously around communications we have with our neighbouring authorities around things like waste services. This is something which, all authorities have abandoned vehicles and untaxed vehicles. If this contract works well for Basildon and Thurrock, then perhaps it's something that we might be able to explore across other authorities in the future. I think that from my understanding from colleagues that I talked to sort of, further out, the level of abandoned vehicles is a lot lower. So they do tend to be under, procurement thresholds. They can work on shorter term contracts and things like that. But obviously if this is successful, then potentially that might be something we might want to explore. And we're always open to the idea of working together with other authorities as well, to join together our processes and contracts wherever possible, especially on things like this.
Councillor Blake.
Yeah, I apologise to James because he's already answered this to me a little while ago on a walkabout. Can we? What is it we can take cars away for? Is it if they're not taxed or not MOT? It's one of the two, isn't it? And I can't remember what it was you mentioned now.
Mr. Hendry.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's untaxed. It has to be untaxed for, I think it's 6 months and a day. It has to be out of tax. So, yeah, I believe so. I might be wrong on that. So I'm prepared to be corrected later on. Brett will probably correct me for that in the morning. But yeah, so it's abandoned vehicles. Obviously, if it's in a state of disrepair and is insecure or an arson risk. But it's also the untaxed MOT. You're right. We can't touch.
Okay. The recommendation is to authorise the Assistant Director for Public Spaces to agree a service level agreement between Basildon Borough Council and Thurrock Borough Council in order to undertake a joint procurement of an abandoned and untaxed vehicle contractor for a period of up to 5 years with award subject to the relevant authorisation process. I vote in favour. Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Councillor Davis.
In favour.
Councillor Holliman.
For.
Councillor Buckley.
For.
Councillor Morris. I don't think I know he's turned off his camera and he's muted. Well, that's 5 in favour, 1 not present for the vote. That is carried. Move on to agenda item 8. Julie.
Sorry, Councillor. On the protocol, it says if a member loses their connection,
He hasn't
we need
lost
to give them.
He hasn't lost his connection.
He's gone altogether now. Oh no, he's back. There, we can see him again.
Okay, but I'll just pick up on that because at the Policy and Resources Committee, when Councillor McGurran was on screen, was on with his name and muted still, and couldn't vote, he was recorded then as not present for the vote on 2 occasions. Councillor Morris, did you hear what we were voting on? Are you in favour or against?
In favour.
Right, that's unanimous now then. Thank you. Thank you. Agenda item 8, the youth zone proposal update. This was asked for at our last committee meeting. There's a detailed report there on the progression so far. The recommendations are that the committee note the progress made since the August 2020 meeting on negotiations with the landowner of the identified preferred site, development with negotiating the various legal agreements with on-side, and undertaking a consultation with local people. And that questions and scope of the consultation with local young people is agreed with the chairman of Neighbourhood and Public Spaces Committee before launching. And that a further update report is to be provided at the November meeting of this committee. Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, so this report follows on from a series of reports now, just to take us through where we've been so far. So budget approval was given at council in February this year for the capital and revenue for youth facilities in the borough. That was followed by coming back in March earlier this year with an options appraisal of sites, permission to go out for an options appraisal on sites, which was presented back in August, which was the last time we gave I was able to give an update on the youth zone. So yes, as Councillor Harrison said there were 3 things that were principally agreed at the last committee, that officers could start the proposals to negotiate with landowners on site acquisition. And you will see from the report that progress has been made. So coming on to page 43 of the agenda today, we'd already got through those first 2 bullet points about the options appraisal and the shortlist. But since we last met, basic architectural study has been undertaken to understand site capacity in terms of the building size and parking reprovision impact. Requirements have been checked with on-site to ensure that we're meeting suitability for the type of facility that they would normally build and would be operated by the local trust. A meeting has been held with the landowner, importantly, by officers to discuss the opportunity for securing the site, and those conversations remain ongoing. And of course, I would hope to be able to give some more firm details on that when I came back in November. Discussions, internally, the council has identified a project manager to move this forward as well with regards to the property side of things. So they'll be looking to appoint legal support and commission cost advice and support, etc. So that's how we're getting on with regards to the negotiating for the site acquisition. Our legal team have also started the process of looking at provisional legal agreements and structures, and I'm pleased to say that some meetings have now taken place with on-side to better understand what that looks like, and some draft heads of terms are being drawn up just so at this stage we can understand what that might look like, so as we can bring that back to the relevant committee at the appropriate time. So progress being made from there. And thirdly, the consultation. I've been picking up on this with our policy team as well as our communications team, and that's progressing well. And pending the agreement towards the recommendations today, I very welcome being able to work with the committee chair to get this launched, which I think is a really important piece of work to understand the needs and the wishes and the opportunities that our local young people think such a facility could bring to them. So that is it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Okay, that's an update in reality. If any member wants to come in, the reason I asked particularly to seek to give the approval for the consultation with the young people, I want to ensure that we're talking to the relevant young people across the borough, the ones in schools, etc., etc. And we've got to make sure that when we deal with the youth zone, that the connectivity across the borough is important, as well as what is operating within within the youth zone. So that's important. Councillor Davis, I think as is indicated he wishes to speak, and then Councillor Buckley. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I'd just like to well, just support what you've just said about the importance of consultation with young people. I've particularly keen to hear more elaborate, more expansion on what sort of age groups we're consulting, whether we're consulting with schools, youth services. We've got Essex Youth Service, but we've also got youth clubs locally and Essex Boys and Girls Clubs, another organisation as well. Other levels of questions going to be different depending on their age ranges as well, and the level of questioning may be more complex for a 16-year-old rather than a 10-year-old. So, it's really important we get the consultation right, and I'll be happy to hear the plans forward for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. I think that's very, very important, because the age range which onside will want to accommodate at the youth zone does vary, and it can go up to, I think, isn't it 25? Is it 25 if it's
25 with additional needs? So its core audience will be 8 to 19.
That's right. So it's looking at a wide range of young people. So it's important of not only how we consult, but who we consult. You're quite correct. Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. A couple of comments. One on the consultation, and I agree with you that any consultation, regardless of the topic, needs to be with the widest possible audience relevant to that service. What does concern me, and particularly with young people, is the groups that are hard to reach, because most of our young people, as I know you're aware, are good, decent people. And there's a hard core of people that don't get involved with those that act responsibly. And it's getting to those and getting those involved in social activities, I think, which will help to improve quality of life for them and for the community as a whole. So there is just a challenge about reaching hard to reach. Two other questions from the report. One on page 43, it does refer to the council having instructed our external legal contractors. And I'd like to know who the legal contractors are and how they were appointed. Secondly, further up the page, there's a reference to the site itself. And I'm not going to mention the site because I appreciate that's still under part 2. But I'm just a little bit concerned. Is the council going to be paying development value for that site, or a community development value for that site? Because I don't know that there's many benevolent landowners in the Basildon Borough. So I don't know whether that can be answered without giving anything away, or if not, I'm quite happy to have a response in writing.
Can I just respond to part of that? Is we won't mention the site, it hasn't been mentioned to date, and the question of purchasing or buying a site will not be the responsibility of this committee. We will not be authorising a purchase. That would be a matter for the Policy and Resources Committee. On the second point, on the legal one, Mr. Brace.
It's just to give you assurance, Councillor Buckley, there are a number of options that we are discussing with the landowner. As yet, we have not concluded what that will or will not be, but certainly members will get full sight of that at the appropriate time. There are a number of options. We're not just pursuing one just purchase. There are other options.
And the legal advisors?
Oh, sorry, that is a company called Burkitt's. I'm afraid.
I know
This, you know, Julie.
So that's fine.
Yeah, I think they were procured through a framework or via a tender, but I can confirm that to you back in writing, or get the appropriate officer to do that. But
that's fine. I know of Burkitt, so that's fine.
I think it goes some years back as well.
Yeah.
Can I just comment, Councillor Buckley, you commented about the youngsters who are hard to reach. Can I say, having spoken and a few times and met the people on side who operate the youth zones, what they have achieved is once they're open, it's the hard to reach ones who've heard about the places and joined in. They've been very good at getting the hard to reach youngsters into the youth zone. So hopefully, it's always difficult to get hold of the consultations, I agree, but Onside have a very good track record of getting the hard to reach ones into their facilities. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Taylor, for the update, and both of you for the work that you've done on this. I genuinely believe that this is an exciting initiative that has the potential to make a real difference to young people's lives, and I think that's something that we should all support. And key to that is getting the consultation right. It's vital that we listen to young people, because ultimately they're the individuals that are going to benefit from this most. But what it also does is create that sense of ownership. If you involve young people in the design and the build of something, they're going to have that sense of ownership of it. They're going to enjoy it and really get the most out of it that way. And as others have said tonight, that involves getting the consultation right. It involves going to speak to young people of different ages and from different settings as well, and doing a consultation imaginatively to get the biggest amount of feedback that we want in the broadest possible sense, so that we can create what our young people want that's going to help them thrive.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Right, I'll move to the recommendations as I read out earlier, which are on page 41 and 42 of the report. I'll take them en bloc. Recommendations 1, 2 and 3. I will vote in favour. Councillor Davis.
In favour.
Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Councillor, I've lost you again. Councillor Morris.
Against.
Councillor Buckley.
Against, as we were at the previous meeting.
Councillor Hollyman.
Abstain.
Abstain. Right, that is carried. Right, we'll move then to item 9, the annual performance update on the Basildon Sporting Village and other leisure contract. Can I just look at on page 2, the recommendation says the committee is invited to consider and comment on the performance of the Sporting Village and other leisure contract facilities. Let me say this first of all. It is evident from the report tonight that our leisure contractor has undertaken great work since the last report. Increasing the number of people using our facilities is a key priority in the contracts, and that was being achieved. COVID has evidently halted that excellent progress, and I think it is important that we continue to support everyone active during this difficult time. More than ever, our residents will need these facilities to help maintain or regain their health and well-being. As we have already seen in the report, our centres are open, and most importantly, thanks to our staff in environmental health, they are safe for our residents to use. So the recommendation I would like to move tonight, that this committee would like to place on record our thanks to everyone active for their hard work prior to COVID and for their diligent work in reopening our leisure facilities. Okay, who wants to come in first? Oh, as an office, I assume you've all read the report. That's an excellent report on what we've achieving before COVID thwarted us and thwarted everyone active. We have the Policy and Resources Committee has helped them out financially over this difficult period, but overall it's been a success story. Mr. Taylor?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Yes, I mean it's been a joy to give this report over the last couple of years, because it's just been continual raise, and you are right to say this has been a slightly more difficult year. The contracts of the BSV, the Sporting Village contract, and the other leisure contract, which includes Eversley and Wickford, are slightly over different time frames. So the Wickford and the Eversley one have, in essence, missed the COVID era, as it were, because it finishes in February when the contract ends there, whereas the Sporting Village one very much has seen, well, it's got caught up within the closure, but we probably all remember that the stories preceding lockdown starting had really started to massively hurt leisure centres in February onwards, really, and by the time they did actually close, they were running very low numbers. I think it is also worth mentioning that we had a problem with the pool boom at Basildon Sporting Village during this period, which hurt and harmed us and caused us all sorts of pain trying to get that fixed and trying to find contractors that could do that. And I'm incredibly pleased that we managed to do that, but that also would have had a detrimental effect, but not in the levels that COVID did. It's also obviously worth mentioning that when I'm back here next year, if I'm back here next year, talking about this, it's going to be an even more scary story, because then we're talking about months of lockdown and phased and limited returns. But it has been a success story overall. I think what's really worth mentioning is that I mean, certainly Basildon Sporting Village now, as of 1920, has brought in almost 14 million visits. And I think that's a really good headline to look at. The Eversley growth over this period is 28.6%. Which is absolutely fantastic. There's a minimal growth at Wickford, but a growth is a growth, and it was BSV, which I say does enter into the period of the COVID lockdown beginnings, that has seen some suffering. There's also a number of things that happened over this last year that I think the contract's been absolutely brilliant at allowing. So we worked with them fantastically to launch and run backside to trackside as part of Basildon at 70 to get people active, which was they were brilliant corporate supporters of. Basildon Pride took place in Basildon Sporting Village this year, and for anyone that was there will know what an incredibly vibrant and busy and incredibly sunny day that was in the middle of September last year. And also in other sites, working with More Life, the bariatric and obesity group, who have been taking people out into actually giving these sessions actually in leisure centres and then participating, building people's confidence. So some really good additional value stuff that's been happening as well. If it helps, Councillor, I can just give a little bit of an update as to kind of what's been happening perhaps since the contract, or since the report period runs through. So, as you mentioned, all 3 sites reopened have reopened since, so that was on the 27th of July. Swimming began again on early August, on the 5th of August, with swimming lessons themselves beginning on the 22nd of August. Now, these things were phased based on government guidance and supporting national government body guidance, getting the staff retrained and all of those type of things that they needed to do. And I am pleased to say that, to contradict a little bit of something that Paul said earlier when he said that the athletics track was being done and we were waiting the track mark, he was absolutely telling the truth. Apart from about 5 o'clock, I got a message to say the track mark criteria had been passed. So I can now give live breaking news that has now passed. So there you go. So breaking news for everyone now.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. He probably would have got the message. I think he was talking to me at 5 o'clock, so that's probably why he didn't get it. So don't worry about it. Anybody want to come in on that report? Okay. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Taylor, for the report and the updates there. I think sport has, and it is a huge and powerful tool for making a real difference to individuals' well-being. And what I'm really pleased to see within this report is the range of community activities that have been undertaken over the last 12 months and during the contract period. I think that goes beyond what many of us would have expected, and really pleased to see that take place.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Brace.
It's just also to update members, we have been working quite closely with Sport England and Active Essex to help assist us, as none of us across Essex have been here before, around the recovery of leisure. So we have been working with another 10 local authorities in Essex to support our contractors and for those that operate their facilities themselves to the best way of opening. So we have a consistent approach across the county. That has ensured that as far as Essex's leisure is concerned, we have held the highest standards to provide COVID-safe facilities. It is a bleak picture for leisure across the country. Obviously, income is significantly down across the country. And some facilities, even to this day, have not reopened because of the financial impact to them. It is a very grim picture for leisure. And everyone active are doing all they can to generate income to enable that to survive. But there will be a shortfall, and we are certainly pressing through our contacts at Sport England and through Active Essex and to the government of what can be done to assist us in continuing to operate or getting our operator to manage our facilities for us. So we are certainly not out of a very difficult position yet in terms of our leisure facilities, but certainly we have a contractor that is doing all they can to make sure a facility is safe and getting as many people as they can, including some very vulnerable people that are returning to the centre now, to enable them to start having a healthy lifestyle and socially interacting at the appropriate distances so that their lives are maintained in a good place. So it's just we will need to put some pressure on those various agencies to help us.
Thank you, Mr. Brace. At the last meeting, I think you did indicate that the government may well be helping out. We hadn't heard anything further yet as a relation to local authority run leisure facilities and contracted leisure facilities. And I think we're still waiting to hear if there is going to be any support.
There is still, I've had an update today, there are still conversations between the Treasury and the DCMS. There is an imbalance between those that operate their own facilities because they're able to claim money via the income support grant, which I spoke about earlier, which we can for example, the Towngate and other places that we directly manage. We can't get that support for our externalised leisure contract. So we're arguing 2 points. We should be able to do that. And Wales have recently, I think in the last 2 weeks, provided a pot of 14 million for externalised leisure for their local authorities. So we're hoping that England follows suit. So we do need to keep the pressure up in terms of what we need across England. It's seen as a gap of around 1 billion. So you can see that it is a big issue in terms of leisure facilities up and down England.
Thank you, Mr. Brace. Okay, the recommendation, this committee would like to place on record our thanks to everyone active for their hard work prior to COVID and for their diligent work in reopening our leisure facilities. I will vote in favour of that. Councillor Ferguson?
In favour.
Councillor Davies?
In favour.
Councillor Morris?
In favour.
Councillor Buckley?
In favour.
Councillor Hollyman?
For.
Okay, thank you very much. Paul? Yeah, Mr. Brace, I assume we'll convey that to everyone active, please.
I will ensure it is done. Yep.
Thank you very much. Right, item 10, the Neighbourhood Spaces Committee work programme, which is on page 56. Can I just indicate that the workload is quite heavy? We may well be putting in an additional committee meeting in towards the beginning of November, because we need to add, was already decided tonight, to bring the youth zone back at the next meeting and also the waste strategy back at the next meeting. So there's additional items there. There's the items there for November anyway. On the one which is expanded enforcement trial, results of trial, I think we need a report before that because it finishes in February, the contract. We have a meeting now in the diary for the 20th of January. It might well be on how well it's gone up to that date, whether or not we renew the trial, renew the contract for a further period. So if we could include that January, right, Mr. Brace is going to tell me I can't do that.
No, I'm not going to say that at all. We will check because of the COVID break that was in place. We will check legally for you before. So yes, clearly put it on the work programme that we will meet, but we'll check whether we can extend the trial for the period that was lost. So
Okay.
we'll look into that, because I think it would only be fair that if they couldn't operate, we can't judge whether it's been a success or not. So we'll see whether we can extend that period.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Any other member got anything for the work programme? Councillor Davis.
Sorry, Chair, I just wanted to clarify. You got 9 members in 9 members, 9 items in November. You're proposing an additional January meeting to half of those items.
No, I'm proposing an additional November meeting.
Right.
The date I've got in mind at the moment is the 4th of November, I think.
Yeah.
Is the 4th of November as a possible meeting. I think it's important that some of these items we need to know where we're going with them, because the Billericay swimming pool, that was COVID affected that. The Pitsea swimming pool, COVID has affected that. We need to make quite clear at this point in time, when we come to some of these items, how we are going to proceed, because it might well be we're dealing with outside bodies, outside contractors, and what their situation is, and whether we need to change direction on anything. So it's important we consider these. The play review update is important because we haven't had one since 2006, and we're having this one now. And I've started last Monday the review with the particular wards, and we're going round as 5 meetings so all councillors can be involved. I had the one with the Billericay and Crouch councillors, or those who turned up on Monday. One I knew wasn't coming, but he'd already given me what he saw of the review and his views on the review. But only 2 other councillors turned up, which is a bit unfortunate, because I want all councillors to have a view on the play areas and how we proceed for this 10-year programme on our play areas. And there's a 10-year programme with expenditure of quite a big amount involved in that programme. So it's important that all members get involved in these reviews. So we come back in November, and then we will go out to public consultation once members have given their views. So that's important. That's on the agenda. So it is November is going to be a busy month. I think the rest of this municipal year is going to be a busy period as well, because there's lots going on, and this committee has got a lot of work to do. Any additional items for the work programme? Right, okay. The recommendation is we endorse the work programme as set out within the report. I'll vote in favour. Councillor Ferguson.
In favour.
Councillor Davis.
In favour.
Councillor Morris.
In favour.
Councillor Hollyman.
For.
Councillor Buckley.
Oh.
That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Well, that's all we've got tonight. I knew that was all we've got time for, but I just meant this. That's a very good meeting. Thank you very much for your cooperation in running the meeting. I think you've done well, all of us tonight on this. So thank you very much. And Julie, if you can now, we can say good night to the public and we can close the YouTube